Hey guys, today we are going to talk about something a little controversial. I've seen some big scraps on social media with regards to this topic, and that is covering your boards. I personally am a big fan of covering your boards. I think that this kind of looks ugly. Your customers are paying good money. A lot of people, their defense is that, well, I'm wasting fondant, I'm wasting money, costs me money to cover my board. It costs literally $1 or $2 and makes a huge difference in the overall appearance of your cakes, and I think then you can therefore charge more for them too. So just incorporate it in the cost. So typically I cover my boards in fondant, and I choose a color that coordinates well with my cake. The board is part of your cake, and I usually decorate my boards as well. If I have little figures on my cakes, usually I'll have one sitting on the board. I'll put happy birthday and the person's name on the board a lot of the time, so it's really part of the cake. So I do have a tutorial on how to cover your cakes in fondant, but today we're going to be talking about covering your cakes with scrapbook paper. So the thing I love about scrapbook paper is they're very decorative. They're very bold, they're bright, they're fun, and when you have a board that's very decorative and busy, guess what that means? It means you can make a cake that's a little more simple, and you don't have to do as much work. Time is money, and you can do a really simple cake because it's sitting on a very busy board and all of your colors coordinate, and it's just really a nice effect. Issue with scrapbook paper is it's porous, and our cakes have buttercream, which has fat, and porous things absorb the fat, and you would have a greasy cake board. But I'm going to show you what to do to prevent that, okay? So we're going to get going. I have this one start at the first stage, and I'm going to set that aside, and we'll be bringing this one back in. So here we have a 12-inch cake drum. Obviously, you could do this with any size. 12 inches or smaller. Typically, scrapbook paper is 12 by 12. You can do a larger board, but that just means you're going to have to piece your scrapbook paper together and have like one or like 2 or 3 sheets and kind of piece your pattern together, kind of like wallpaper. So you can go as big as you want, you just need more paper. Scrapbook paper is very inexpensive. Typically I go to the craft stores and I use my 40 off coupon. Some dollar stores sell really great scrapbook paper. Wrapping paper would be great as well. And this is another way of introducing a license and doing it legally. So let's say you were doing a Peppa Pig cake and you didn't want to recreate the characters. You could find Peppa Pig scrapbook paper or wrapping paper. And because you've purchased it, you've purchased the license for it. It's just like when you purchase little plastic toys and put them on the cake. That's okay because you've purchased it, and the person that, or the manufacturer that created those characters or that scrapbook paper has already paid for that license, okay? So you could do Peppa Pig paper and then do a cake that is just, you know, in the colors and the tones of Peppa Pig. So a good thing to do. So let's get started. My tools are obviously a cake board, whoops, cake board, a piece of scrapbook paper. I have a plastic scraper, bowl scraper, non-toxic white glue. I use non-toxic white glue even though this doesn't touch your cake. Might as well, you know, be safe. Little dollar store sponge brush and a glue stick and some ribbon to trim the edge of the board, because I'm also a big fan of that too. I don't like to see the silver unless the cake itself has silver dragées on it and the silver actually goes with the theme of the cake. That's the only time I won't cover my board. Okay, and some scissors. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to set this paper aside, and I also have a cutting mat because this beautiful blue blue PME board. I don't want to score that with my X-Acto knife. Okay, so I just put some glue on my board. Okay. Take my sponge brush and just start painting it. Make sure you get right to the edge because you don't want your paper to lift. This is actually a lot of fun to do. And I'll typically glue my paper onto my board the day before so that the glue, or a few hours before at least, so that the glue has a chance to dry. Okay? Because the second step of this to protect the paper from the grease of our buttercream, you need the paper to be dry underneath to do that step. Okay, so I've got my glue on my board. I'm going to take my scrapbook paper and turn it over and center this. So I don't look at all four sides. I just focus on making sure that my board is within the edge on one side and within the edge in front of me. So two sides. And then I know for sure if I'm within that space right on the edge that I've got paper that goes beyond the edge of the board. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense, Jonathan?
Perfect.
Perfect. So I'm just going to press this down and I'm going to flip it over. And there's going to be some little trapped air bubbles under here, and that's where the scraper comes in. Kind of like when you're wallpapering walls. I'm just going to gently smooth over this. And sometimes because the glue is wet, you will feel it start to maybe buckle, and you can smooth those out. But once the glue starts to dry, those buckles shrink back up and you get a really nice smooth finish. So if you get a little buckling at the beginning, don't worry too much. It will smooth out. But you can work those out as well with your scraper. Don't be shy. You can press pretty hard. You're not going to cut the paper. This is plastic. I wouldn't use a metal bench scraper because then you can probably cut or tear the paper. And this is feeling pretty good. I don't feel any air bubbles. Let's see what's going on here. I think I need more glue there. My glue started to dry before. There we go. If you just feel any edges lifting, you can go back in with your sponge brush. Okay, so that feels pretty good. I'm going to now flip this over like so. And I'm going to use a scalpel or an X-Acto knife. And I'm going to come in and trim this paper to the size of the board. Now, I've seen people do this before where they pre-cut their paper and then glue it on, but the chances of you getting it perfectly lined up with your cake board are next to nil, so it's better to cut once it's glued on the board. There we go. Oops. Make sure you cut right through. And one more corner. This blade is starting to get dull. There we go. Okay. So we have a cake board that is covered in really pretty paper, and I would put a white cake on this. I would put a coral cake, an orange, green, yellow. You have a lot of options here. So I'm going to push this scrap aside, and I'm going to put this cake board aside to dry. So we want our glue to dry completely before we finish this next step. And again, if you feel any air bubbles or buckling, Even after you've cut or trimmed your paper, you can just push those out. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. And let's get the one that I did a few hours ago. It's completely dry. The paper's not lifting anywhere. And I'm going to cover this with plastic. And the reason for the plastic is so that the fats from our cake do not absorb into the paper. Now, whenever I put a cake on a board, I always have a board that's the same size as the cake underneath the cake. And even though a board is sitting on top of a board, the edges of that cake still have exposed buttercream and things like that that can make your board greasy. So I'm going to use this. I got this at the dollar store. There are 3 different things you can purchase, and basically it's sticky plastic. So you peel the paper away and the plastic is clear. Let's see if my fingernails are short. There we go. The plastic is clear and it's tacky. You can buy, they sell this, it's like vinyl, or they sell this stuff for scrapbooking. But it's not cheap. You can also buy cupboard liner, you know, that peel and stick cupboard liner that you put in your cupboards, and if you can find clear, that works great. But the most economical stuff that I have found, I got this at the dollar store. It was $1.25, and it is in the stationery section for covering your books. So I guess students and such put their books in plastic over the cover to protect them, and that's what this is. So I'm going to cut a piece. I'll go a little bit bigger than 12 inches. It's nice because it has a grid here, so I can just follow the grid. Let's put something here so it doesn't roll up on me. And I'm just going to cut. And for this $1.25 roll, I can probably do 3 or 4 cake boards. Not bad. My cut doesn't have to be perfect because I'm trimming all of this. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this aside here, and I'm going to carefully peel my paper away. If I can catch the edge, let's look for a good corner. Here we go. So I'm going to carefully peel this paper away. And it's the paper that curls up. Once we peel it off the paper, this isn't going to curl up on itself and stick to itself, which is good. I'm going to take my cake board again, just like I did with my first layer of paper, and place this down. And I will flip it back over just like we did with the scrapbook paper, and I'm just going to push out any air bubbles or pockets. I have seen this plastic too with a matte finish. This one is shiny. Doesn't bother me, but if you prefer matte, I have seen it with a matte finish as well. Okay. You can use Glad Press and Seal. It does have a slight pattern to it, but I do prefer this. Let's unstick myself from my cutting board. And just like we did with the scrapbook paper, I'm now going to trim the excess plastic away. Where did I put my blade?
It was underneath there.
Was it?
Yeah, lift that up.
Oh, thank you. Anyone who's taken a class from me, a hands-on class, knows that my tools are always right in front of my face and I never see them. It's a thing. Okay, so I'm just going to trim this away now. See if I'm getting through. I am. And because you've got plastic on your board and you would be attaching a cake that has a cardboard disc underneath it to this board, you can adhere the two together so that your cake doesn't slide around with just some melted chocolate. And once the chocolate sets, your cake won't shimmy. You can even use hot glue because it's plastic being glued to cardboard, and that doesn't touch your cake. So you can do that too. And once this is done, I'm going to do another tutorial on quilting, how to quilt your fondant. And I'm going to do it on this cake board. So you'll want to check that out just to see what the board looks like with a nice colored fondant. I think I'm going to go with coral since living coral is the Pantone color for the year. That's why I chose this paper. There we go. Catch. We're almost right in the camera. Whoops, that's gonna look 3D. Okay, we are done. I'm just gonna, check at different angles in the light to make sure there are no trapped air bubbles. Again, I think we are good. And we have a beautiful cake board, which I'm just going to add ribbon to. My favorite way to add ribbon is using just a glue stick. I prefer that to a hot glue gun because the hot glue gun, sometimes the glue starts to set before you get the ribbon on, and then you have like lumpy, bumpy ribbon that doesn't sit flat. And that, to me, looks kind of not so nice. So just get the glue on my board. This is non-toxic too, not that it's going to touch your cake. Some people like to wrap their ribbon around and poke it in place with a pin. That makes me a little nervous. I don't like having pins near my cakes. I do use pins to poke air bubbles out of my fondant, but I don't want to give a cake that has a pin anywhere near it. You never know. Kid might like pull it out and poke their brother or stick it in the cake. You never know. I'm not judging. I'm not here to judge. It's just my preference. It's not something I would do. Okay. And trim our ribbon. Get a little bit more glue on the tail there. Stick it in place. And there we go. I think that's a pretty cake board. Don't you?
Pretty.
Yeah, pretty cake board. Okay, so that's it. Cover your boards. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and if you're worried about that, just incorporate it in the cost of your cake to your clients. It's $1 or $2. Makes a huge difference, okay? If you like this video, come join us on learntocake.com where we have all kinds of cake hacks and really simple, fun ideas for your beautiful edible art. Okay, so come check us out and definitely watch our quilted video where we use this pretty board, okay? Have fun, guys. Be creative with your boards and cover them.